As young people, as boys, as girls, as men, as women, as individuals, as families, we're going to take a look at this whole issue of survival. So thanks for joining us, and go get your coffee and just relax now. I'm going to give you a little quote to put it in perspective so that we understand what we're really talking about today. Be a good listener, but be careful who you listen to. And that's probably one of the best survival suggestions that you might start out with today, is that who you listen to, because you can kind of go down the wrong path when you start listening to a lot of people that really are beyond the pale of reason and what's appropriate. So, Mark, thanks for joining us today, and we're going to have a little conversation. We're going to enjoy each other here and get to know each other a little bit more, and the audience gets a chance to know you and some of the things you're involved in and things besides the book that you've written. You do a lot of different kind of stuff, so they'll get a chance to get acquainted with you. So let me just start out with this way, Mark. Introduce yourself to us. How were you raised? What was your family like? What was your home like? Were you kind of pretty traditional, or were you raised in a kind of dysfunctional home? Or both?
A mixture, I believe. The dysfunction would probably be very common and make it certainly relevant to many families. And a broken home. It was a broken home.
I see. Mm-hmm.
Poor family. Here locally, most of my life. Mm-hmm. My mother worked. Starting out, a young family, 3 kids, didn't even have a driver's license, let alone a job. So it was a very difficult start. As I matured, I found myself becoming more wild, not by choice, just my nature, my natural course, I guess.
I didn't have the real control over your life.
That's absolutely correct. Mm-hmm. She was working full time.
Well,
so I was free.
Kind of raised the family by herself, and
yes, sir.
That's
a
tough job.
Found myself homeless.
Oh, did you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Not something I easily admit, but
so you were one of the original.
Yeah.
Homeless of Fresno.
Yes,
huh?
sir. Yes, sir, I was. Panhandling at first, a little bit, not a lot, but panhandling. I wasn't a very honest individual as well, if I can admit
Well, it kind of goes together.
Yeah.
When you have to live on the street and off the street,
yes, sir.
You start to vary your range of honesty, your range of reason, and you can tell stories because you survived that way.
Everyone has more than me was the perspective. Everyone else can afford it. Now, I wasn't into great theft or crime. In fact, a large part of the evolution that led to this is a result of becoming more familiar with some of the characters of society.
I see.
Not wanting to be familiar with some of the gangbangers, and I don't know if I can use that term, the wild side of society, other homeless people.
It's a different world living off the street.
It is.
I mean, you meet a different group of people. You interact with a different part of the community, a different part of the world.
It is a resource acquisition process there as well. And I think that's the mindset that I go into this with, and part of the reason why I want to share my experience.
So the idea of survive, when you wrote this book on survival techniques, survival concepts, and so on, you had 2 survivals already you just talked about. One, you had to survive this home of a fatherless home, a parent, mother raising a couple kids, and then surviving the streets.
That's true.
Exactly. Off the streets. I mean, that is where you learn your survival skills.
Absolutely. And as it evolved, I was on the streets, as you put it, for about 18 months, from age 18 on. And it did start out in this urban environment that we live, but as I became more familiar, including familiar with the police, started knowing who I was.
Sure.
So I found myself wandering more the countryside, I think is the fair way to put it.
To kind of get off to the edges or the fringes.
Yes, sir. Now, though I didn't learn what we today consider wilderness survival skills in that environment, I do wish I'd had those skills at that time.
Well, you probably had them intuitively. You not maybe know that this is my survival skill.
It was very primitive.
But you learn as you go. You learn how to make it and how to keep alive. And
I wouldn't trade that experience now that I'm through it.
Is that right?
No, sir.
Is that right? That was a kind of learning experience.
I
18 months of going to school on the streets.
it what really was.
Yeah.
It is a large part of who I am today, but it also gives me a bit of a cynicism. Maybe not.
That's interesting.
Not a severe one.
Yeah,
but,
tell me about
but
that.
A little bit of trouble with authority, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily follow everyone else.
Were you mistreated by authorities on the street? Were you abused by authorities, mainly the police,
yes,
if you will?
Yes. One example, if I may, I was standing out to one side of a convenience store, thinking where I was going to go tonight. And I guess to a local police officer, it appeared that I was maybe staking out going to rob the store.
I see.
And when I mentioned my own brushes with law, it was never to that extent, not that severe. But
still,
he hit my head on the hood of his car instead of just asking for my ID, and kicked your feet out to frisk you or whatever. But I didn't expect to have my head hit on the car like that. So that's just one of many.
Kind of an exercise of authority. I have more authority than you have, and I'm going to show you who's boss here. I mean, there are certain motives that police have for doing that kind of behavior. It's unfortunate, and happened to be
common.
not a common experience, which is probably a good thing.
It was,
but it was enough
character.
to actually affect you and create an attitude, within you.
It absolutely
regarding
was.
authority.
Now, I don't mean to imply that I don't respect authority at all.
Sure.
But it has set me on a path of self-reliance, I think is what I'm trying to describe.
Which is probably a path that led to the writing of the book about survival.
It did.
Because you survive on the basis that you are self-reliant, you are independent.
Absolutely.
You're self-sufficient.
Absolutely.
And you got to start with that. The belief that you can do it, that you can handle it, that you can care. And then you develop tools along the way, I'm sure. It's a pathway of development.
Sir.
It's a learning experience.
Now, though I don't have any disrespect or don't mean to imply that I don't trust the authority that was my mother, she didn't really have the tools at the time to instill in me that trust. Now, when I say trust, I don't mean that I mistrusted her, but rather that she didn't have what I needed.
Yeah.
And it often was the case.
And, that's maybe true of a lot of mothers and a lot of parents, and especially in terms of a single-parent home. She's got commitments. She got to raise some income so that you kids can be raised. And she got her own priorities.
She was a very hardworking and determined person, and my hat's off to her for the many, many years that she raised those 3 kids alone in a tough time.
What was the good thing about your mother, though? I mean,
there are many good things.
Obviously, all parents have good and bad, but...
My mother is a very vivacious personality, a very I believe very kind, loving, and vivacious personality. And
did that affect you? Did that help you develop that same kind of lifestyle or skill or relationship
yes,
pattern?
sir, absolutely. In fact, I could not take part in something like this here today had it not been for her.
Is that right?
Yes. She was a professional clown at one point here locally. And so she, of course, would be a very, very
well, you talked about her being vivacious. I guess that kind of goes together, doesn't it?
And I think without that confidence, given what I've disclosed thus far, you can see how that would have carried me.
That's right.
And then, resulting
so you became more independent yourself.
Yes, sir, I did, and am now confident enough to write something that I am eagerly wanting to share.
I gather you're sensitive, or you're caring for people who are in the same situation that you came up in.
I do.
The single home, a single parent, couple kids, trying to make it on their own, kind of living off the street, sympathetic to people who are trying to make it that way. And I gather you're caring, or you're sensitive to.
At the same time, I knowing what I know about those conditions and what they can lead to, I also don't feel like I can be close to those people.
Is that right?
There's a risk.
Yeah.
There's a risk.
Yeah, there is.
In much the same way that we find ourselves associated maybe with people with mental illness or drug dependency, that desperation leads
Yeah.
to many things that very good people would otherwise not take part in.
In the same way that you learned from your mother, what did you learn from your street experience? 18 months living on the street. What's one or two things that really you learned in that process that you can say that helped you?
I have to tell you that the confidence, the moving forward, and that is actually the quality. One of the great qualities I think that my mother did instill in me was the ability to continue, tenacity.
Oh, persist. Go forward.
There was a time that I felt that it absolutely could not get any worse. The truth, though, was that if I didn't continue, I guess the option at that point would be ending your own life or something like that.
Sure,
anyway,
sure.
I may have been on the very cusp of a change in life at that moment. And it would be my dumb luck, if you will, to make the wrong decision just before
you can materialize on it, capitalize on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I attribute that to my early childhood as well.
Yeah.
My grandfather.
So from those experiences, you must have come up with this idea about survival. To how to survive, how to make it, how to defend yourself, how to protect yourself, but also how to live under circumstances that are against you, that are pretty powerful circumstances to overcome. So was that the concept of survival that you kind of based this book on?
It absolutely was.
What's your view of this idea of survival?
Well,
given that history, if you will.
Well, there's a lot of history. I got to be honest with you, where it really manifested in the form of a literary work was after the 2007 crisis, the economic crisis.
Yes.
It intrigued me because there was a lot of panic. And so I looked at other economies and other societies, not just economic failure, but others as well. Argentina at the time was fresh. This was 2000, 2001. And I read a story, I don't recall the author's name now, but I read a book where he lived through this, and they were using defensive techniques in the home because of intruders.
Oh, yes.
It was
sure.
A block or two from a tourist area, and they're fighting for their lives. There was no work.
I've heard that too in talking to missionaries who are in different countries in different parts of the world, how much they have to learn how to protect themselves and survive in an environment that is dangerous and
it's very primitive.
Strange and primitive is a good word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I was able to, maybe not uniquely, but I was able to take my experience, that kind of almost a feeling of desperation, that lack, and associate, assimilate the information that I was reading and really became very attuned to what that environment was. Because it was not that dissimilar to what I was experiencing.
So that gave you some of the beginnings of this book. Gave you some
Absolutely
way to think and a way to organize your world, and I gather it helped you survive. Then
it did.
I mean, brought you up.
And as a result, if you look Amazon or other resources, or even just Google survival, the majority of what you're going to find is wilderness survival. And this is what compelled me, in part, to actually put it to the pen to paper, so to speak, because having lived what I lived through, without at that time knowing how to rub two sticks together to make fire, I needed fire in some cases nonetheless. So I realized the lack of complete work, and not that mine is complete by any stretch. There would be volumes, but it's not about just the wilderness. It's really, there's an urban side.
That's right. And when I read your book, I can really get the idea of you have to learn how to survive with people.
Exactly.
You have to learn to survive in a world of interpersonal relationships.
Absolutely.
It's not only the home, but it's your friends, it's your associates you work with, it's people you meet in the street, it's people you meet in various social settings. I mean, it's a much broader than environment, as you say, the wilderness.
So initially, I talk about the mindset, and because that mindset
you did, yeah.
allows you to perceive your relationships even differently. So survival has a far less to do, in my mind, with breathing, eating, and drinking water, though that is what we talk about.
Well, that's
and
the
that
basics.
is what
That's the basics. Mm-hmm.
But we also have to come to the table, one to another, with an understanding that is throughout history, 5,000 years of history, recorded history, where we work together to reach goals. And in the current technology information age, those aren't primitive goals anymore. But the skills nonetheless apply.
They're the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I gather really one of the things you have to learn how to talk. You got to learn how to listen. You got to learn how to talk. You got to learn how to interact. You have to learn how to share. You have to learn how to work together. You say come to the table, but that kind of implies, you have to kind of meet people where they are, and they have to meet you where you are, and as a result of that, you build a team, or you build an idea, and then you start working on that.
And this is, in fact, where I lack a lot. Having that initial self-reliance, that need.
I see.
And maybe even a little bit of that mistrust as well of others. I still do need to come to the table, and I'm working on that. That's I think would make my work more complete.
It would, because then you start meeting people. You start interacting with people. You start working together with people. You start sharing with people. You start learning from people. And you become a better person. Now, obviously, you develop these skills, and you share skills. I mean, it's not just learning, it's giving. It's back and forth. It
is, and I do need to listen better. I think we all could.
You lived on the street for 18 weeks. I mean, months. Yeah. Is that a kind of coming to the table experience as well, or is everybody just kind of on their own and keep a distance from each other? Or did you find people that you could begin to form a bond with and learn from and share with? And
it's a very good question, because it's a mix. As you stated in the quote, you have to be a good listener, but you do have to be careful who you listen to. So a lot of times that first impression is good, and a lot of times that first impression is bad.
Yes, it is.
A lot of times it depends on where you're coming from.
That's right.
So
there's a high degree of caution.
Yeah.
I mean, self-defense is being cautious.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how you defend yourself.
And that's the mindset we're talking about.
You have to be cautious, and then you develop a sense of trust.
Yes.
That's
a healthy
grows
relationship
over time.
to me. That's a healthy relationship.
How did you do that?
I'm not sure I have yet. I trust very few people to the extent that I would like to, and that's, I think, natural.
There's some good to that.
Maybe healthy.
We can become too trusting too quickly.
But we also have to trust enough to allow other people to do what they do well, because we don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers.
Well, that's coming to the table. That's coming to the table, because that's where the answers come.
Yes, sir.
Everybody has something to contribute. Everybody has something to offer. Something you can learn from everybody.
Absolutely.
Something.
We have to be open-minded, but we also have to have a good, honest level of discernment, which is a gift.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that you are your own. I am my own best judge of that ability.
When I read your book on Survive, I raised the question to myself, can you survive alone? Is that even possible? Or is survival really dependent upon the team that you build, the relationships you build, the people that you include in your life and allow to come into your life and depend on, and they depend on you?
It's interesting that you asked that question, as I've contemplated often myself, and I feel that there are two paths. They can be one, they can come together, and that to me is a level of maturity.
I see. So you start at one level.
You want to be self-reliant, and then you want to maximize, this is my own perspective, obviously, you want to maximize your abilities and achieve greater goals by sharing and then having others share with you as well.
Yes. I mean, I think it's just not a street behavior. I think that's everybody. I think every relationship, whether it's at work or in a home or whatever, it's as you come to the table, to use your word, but as you open up and as you give information and you receive information and you interact with each other and you learn from each other, and now you develop kind of a team. You're not alone. You may start that way, but you're really not alone. You have people who are in place who are there to be when you need it.
And you're growing in a way as well. At least I have found, as I am opening up to other people more and more each passing year, I'm growing in a way that I did not intend. A good way.
Well, you never know. You start out. I mean, you lived on the street for 18 months. You didn't know where you were going next.
No, I didn't.
I mean, you kind of learn as you go. And I assume it gets better.
It does. It does get better, and you get better at it. So, for example, in the beginning of the 18 months, I slept in an apartment laundry room off and on. Whenever I felt no one was watching, I'd get in there and I'd put a quarter, it might have been all I had, in the dryer, put a stick in the little door thing so that it heats the room, and I'd get a couple hours sleep. Later in my you call it travels, I guess. The tail end of the 18 months, I was actually in Yosemite Valley. I don't know if I should admit this. I was in Yosemite Valley collecting cans, sleeping in a cave.
Sure.
And the reason I went from here to here was largely because of what was going on locally and my need to be separate from it.
Yeah. And, that's a survival technique.
Absolutely.
Is to keep a safe distance from danger. Other people or places or whatever it might be.
And the evolution would not have happened had I not grown in my experiences to the point where I felt like I could do that.
Sure.
I mean, you're going to be up there at nights, I think at the time were 35 to 38 degrees.
Yes.
I had no gear. I had no.
It gets to be pretty cold some nights.
It did get
very pretty cold.
And if you're in an area where you're not supposed to be, a fire would give you away. I did, by the way, have a fire, very small fire. I'd run it for, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then put it out. Enough to eat something. I stole a blanket, and that's where I stayed for 2 weeks in this little cave.
And that's where you came up with all these ideas about survival skills and techniques and methods. And
absolutely.
You really built a life on that now.
I did. And
so you really did go to the University of Street Living.
Oh, I feel I did. I feel I did.
And now have produced a whole lifestyle and a book.
And that was the evolution.
Teach others.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the evolution. There was a lot in the middle, sleeping in vacant lots in a tree or a bush. For a long time, I have to be honest, for a long time I was ashamed. I would not admit some of this stuff.
Well, even now I suppose you are.
No, well, somewhat. It's not going on my LinkedIn page.
Sure.
But I think that the healthiest I could be in this perspective is to want to share with those folks who find themselves in a similar situation, or maybe just the feeling is similar. And all hope is not lost, and never is lost. Without hope, you have nothing. So that there was just that seed, always that seed.
It kept you alive.
It did.
It kept you going.
And that's the mindset. It goes back. It's
like
full
faith.
circle.
It just kind of keeps you going, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it does. So this is a good spot to take a break.
Excellent.
What I'd like to ask you when you come back from our break is for you to kind of outline some very specific techniques or ideas or methods of survival.
Excellent. I'd love to.
That you want to share with families or with women and men and boys, girls, and you might apply it to the whole family context of survival.
Oh, that'd be
because you've written in a book. Give us a kind of a synopsis of some of the things that we can learn or we can adopt so that we survive better, as individuals. Absolutely. We'll do that when we come back from the break. Okay.
Great deal.
Take 2 minutes and get a cup of coffee. See you in a bit.
The Green Gables Care Home is a 24-hour assisted living facility for the elderly located in Clovis, California, offering spacious private and semi-private rooms which are wheelchair approved, catering to the special person in your life who needs attention and wants to live in a loving home environment. The Green Gables Care Home has assisted living in secured homes for elderly with Alzheimer's, memory loss, and for your loved ones needing assistance with their activities of daily living. Call 559-297-9438 and visit greengablescarehome.com.
Sometimes good intentions hurt rather than help. For for just $1.76 per meal. The Fresno Rescue Mission offers more than food. We offer hope. Please donate today.
Do you need a locksmith? Layman's Lock and Safe Service and Repair is available for you. 559-228-1805.
Gained a lot, learned a lot, and got a lot of love. If it weren't for the knowledge that I had gained from the classes at PCC, I probably wouldn't be the mom I am today. See, there it goes.
I would love you to meet my son, Aaron. My situation was very difficult. I didn't know how my life was going to turn out.
We graduated in June 2010 and we got married in July. And through family, the Pregnancy Care Center changed our lives.
The Pregnancy Care Center was a huge, vital part in helping me walk through that pregnancy, in educating me and loving on me during that time.
Choosing a Medicare plan can be difficult and frustrating. Susan Hatch can guide you through the Medicare maze and help find the right plan for you. Susan helps people understand the confusing and drastic changes that occur every year in Medicare. Susan will only recommend plans that will protect your assets and allow you to continue to see your personal doctor. As a 100% independent agent, Susan is not controlled by any particular insurance company to steer a person onto any one particular plan. Susan was awarded the #1 Medicare supplement agent in California. Look for Susan's Medicare question and answers every Monday in the Fresno Bee. Call Susan at 559-307-2287 and visit MedicareToday.net.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Okay, welcome back as we pick up our conversation now with Mark Scott, the author of this little book, not so little, 3-2-1 Survive. And a lot of this book really came from his experiences of 18 months on the street and then learning how to live and how to survive and how to now share that with the rest of us, so that what you've learned you can share. And I read the book. It's a great book. It gives you lots of ideas about their survival. But the concept to me is that you can survive if you know people, if you can talk to people, if you can rely on people, can learn to trust people, and you can have a relationship, because you can't survive alone, independently. You got to survive in the context of a human relationship. And you have to find that and build that. And you have to be trusting. You have to learn people who can be trusted and build that. So give us a couple survival techniques for the family.
The most useful one is changing the mindset to focus on here and now. We're looking down.
Okay.
We've got our cell phones and our tablets, and
Yes.
and I'm watching people walk out of their local department store, and they're looking at these things. They're
That's right.
stuffing their change in a pocketbook or receipts, and they're just not really paying attention. The survival experiences that I think I can most easily share have to do with that kind of environment.
Be in the present.
In the present,
Be
be
in the
aware.
here and now.
Mm-hmm. And you should be that way in your relationships as well. And I think
I like that.
that's really kind of what we all can benefit from the most.
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, you have to have the idea that you are not onto yourself. You're not alone.
Absolutely.
But you're in this world where you're in the here and now, and you have to be aware of who's around you, where you are, how safe you are, how open you are, how free you are.
And I'll take that a step further. We'll take that same example of the
Yes.
department store. As you're leaving the department store, before you hit that door, you should have your business concluded. Your change, if you use cash, should be in your wallet. Your wallet should be in your pocket. If you're a woman shopping, you should have your pocketbook, the receipt, the change concluded before you hit that door. As you hit that door, you should be looking through the glass, and you should be looking around. As you exit the store, you should be aware of any scent Is there a gas leak? Is there a commotion? Who's standing around near the exit of the store? Now, this is not the kind of survival technique that we've become familiar with in that genre, but I think the first great step towards that mindset is that awareness.
Yeah, I think even getting into a car. You should be ready to get in the car, shut the door, and start and go, and not just sit there and then put things in your purse or adjust this and sit there for 3 or 4 minutes and then go. You're vulnerable.
I'd like to say that the most important skill that I've learned is to rub 2 sticks together and make fire, but in all honesty, that's not the most useful. The preparedness, the awareness go hand in hand. You see traffic ahead of you in the street. What's that? What is happening in the lane next to you? And
so you're really kind of talking about an alertness.
I am.
You know, kind of a visual awareness and alertness.
Absolutely.
As to where you are and what is your environment within the immediate area.
And in practicing that awareness day to day and keeping an honest pursuit of it, we actually, I did anyway, opened myself up to some of these other survival techniques that are more along the standard for this genre of wilderness survival, for example. Because now I am aware of my environment, and when you're in the wilderness, being aware of the animal life, the plants, the temperature, the wind, the water, it allows you that opportunity to make use of those resources.
I'm thinking of parents who, need to teach their children, to be self-aware and self-protective. When they walk to school or they're on their way someplace, that they are aware of where they are, who's near, who's coming by them, who's going to be approaching them, are they safe, wherever they happen to be at the point in time. So how do you teach a kid to be aware and self-protective, but yet not teach them how to become paranoid? That everybody out there is going to get you and hurt you.
This was a very important point to me early in my writing. I'll give an example again of the department store. You come out of the department store with your son or your daughter, or nephew, niece for that matter, and someone is asking me 30 years ago, asking for money.
Yeah.
Or maybe even just a Girl Scout selling cookies. Some people that you don't know.
Yes.
This is what we need to talk to our children about. Not the only thing we need to talk to them about, but making them aware of our own intent, our practice. Do as you would have your children do. So you may want to give something to that gentleman who looks homeless, and that's a noble pursuit, but I'm not sure when your children are with you is really the right time to do that. Maybe instead you show your child how to address, stamp an envelope with a donation to the local charity,
charities and
the food bank,
the mission downtown,
exactly,
food bank and things like that. Yeah.
Now I'm not by any means suggesting you don't give to someone on the street that's asking.
Well, I was
for
going to ask you about that. Because the word is don't do that. Direct them to the mission, direct them to the Pavlero house, direct them to some kind of a shelter.
My perspective is probably going to be a great deal different than the average person, and I have mixed emotions about it. I agree with that for the most part. We have a lot of people that are in that situation by choice. They don't necessarily make the best use of the resource that you would give them anyway. I think that's pretty easily concluded.
That's very common.
And you may be contributing, in fact, to their own downfall, depending. At the same time, I don't want to say despicable person, someone that appears to us to be in this desperate condition that we have previously talked about. Maybe $1 or $2 would give them just that little bit, a moment's joy that evening when they can cook something over a fire. Now there would be a caution in this.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, this is why, for the most part, I disagree with giving them anything. You don't ever open your wallet. I've had a screwdriver stuck at my side. I've been threatened I've even had a gun, more than one occasion, brought out and pointed at me when I stop and talk to people.
I see.
Not always homeless people, mind you. Maybe when you're panhandling. I walked upon a drug dealer.
I often talk to people on the street when I'm out there and I'm walking somewhere and I see I often talk and engage in conversation. I've had positive experiences.
And the majority of the time, I think that would be safe.
Yes.
But with regards to the homeless and giving to the homeless, at the very least, you should be cautious. You should be aware. Again, you're aware of your surrounding. Does this person have stuff in their pockets?
Yes.
They generally do. You don't know what that is. You don't know what that stuff is. Also, they're oftentimes drug addiction and mental instability may lead to actions that you would not have concluded would happen in a situation normally.
So what's your advice when it comes to like tools and techniques that you should have, you should buy? We always heard about buying a mace, and having a little squirt so that you can protect yourself with a spray, and different kind of things like that, even to the point of carrying a gun for your own self-protection. What's the rule here of what an average person, an average family should have kind of for self-protective purposes?
Well, I would not profess to be an expert in the field of security. Personal security is really in my opinion, a very personal thing. Are you well qualified to use what you have?
All right.
Would be the first,
good idea.
Point. Not finding yourself in a situation of crisis was probably the best method.
Avoid the crisis situation. I'll just start. Don't even get into one.
Well, if there's a protest going on, a highly debated political process, for example, and people are protesting, you would not want to find yourself in the middle of that group.
Yes.
Even if you were protesting, you should be on the periphery of that group. Similarly, you would not broadcast your means, your affluence in a area of deprivation.
I see. Then you become the target.
Yeah.
Then you become somebody that somebody will envy and take advantage of.
And I talk about that in the second chapter as well. It's commonly referred to as gray man theory, where you blend in. If you're
I read your chapter on that one. That was kind of clever. I had never heard that before, the gray man theory.
So if you're if you're a visitor to another country, there's nothing wrong with appearing to be a tourist in most cases. But if that country became unstable or something was happening at that time and you might want to blend in. You, in your own country, if you were at an event and that event was targeted by somebody that was, whether politically or otherwise motivated to attack a group, having a gray sweatshirt and blue jeans you would not be the target in their crosshairs as easily as the guy wearing the bright blue shirt with the orange swoosh.
I lived 5 years in another country.
Oh.
So I have a little sensitivity to being aware of what's kind of acceptable and what is the norm to kind of fit within that so you don't stand out. And I lived in another country at a time that was kind of tumultuous and a little tense. And so I know what it's like to kind of take that gray spot in life and just kind of live within the context, but yet be yourself.
And the expectations of a general population is this. And when you get outside of this, those people that are looking for a target will find you.
Well, you'll be found.
So far, we've talked a great deal about the social implementation of my experiences, but the preparedness goes a bit further to me, and the acquisition, the resources are a part of that same mindset.
Give us an example of that you're referring to there.
When we talk about wilderness survival, often it's associated with wilderness survival. And though I've been to several schools and many clinics in that training, I've been since, with my experience, been able to put it in its proper context as a school, a technique. Wilderness is one
Yes.
environment in which you would possibly need survival skills. And we've talked about how those same or similar survival skills would apply to an urban environment. But what we really haven't talked too much about is what are you doing now? You already are on the road to preparedness. You have auto insurance, you have health insurance, you have a smoke detector in your home. You have rules that you live by already.
That's right.
And the next step in that is maybe making sure you have a first aid kit, that you are well stocked with food
At home,
and water.
in your car, and where
Absolutely.
you are, where you spend your time.
There is a rule of urgency that I'd like to share. It's rule of threes is also what it's called.
Yes.
You can survive on average 3 minutes without oxygen,
Yes.
3 hours without shelter in an extreme environment,
Yes.
3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So as you look at those tools that you have in your home for preparedness, we should be able to put those into their appropriate urgency so that if you don't have the tools that you need, the resources that you need to survive 3 minutes or to survive 3
It's a concept to
hours.
teach your children.
Yes, sir.
You know, I think that's a family lesson.
It is.
You know, and you know, without getting paranoid about it and overly concerned. I mean, to be reasonable and rational about it. But I think it's a concept that every parent should teach a child. You know, what are the limits of survival, and when are you at risk?
What's realistic?
And, yeah, what's realistic? Is
Here
probably
in
the way of saying it.
California, we're not worried too much about hurricanes in the Central Valley here,
No.
but maybe
And most families
earthquakes.
don't worry about 3 weeks without food or 3 months without food or
Exactly.
whatever.
But if
Yeah.
you slip and scrape your knee, you want to be able to put something on that.
Sure.
For example. So having a small supply of Band-Aids and triple biotic creams and things like that, of course, would be a prudent resource
So for
acquisition.
survival is part of being prepared for the unexpected.
Absolutely.
For the minor tragedies. You know, we always think of these major tragedies.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And, I mean, those are the dramatic ones. But most people don't live dramatic.
No, they don't. No,
yeah.
they don't.
They really live on the day-to-day small stuff that can get to the best of you.
And
It
the
can hurt.
majority of those tools that I would recommend are applicable to the everyday life as well as the crisis.
So when you did this book and you put this book together, tell me about this 3-2-1 concept. You have
Okay.
3-2-1 survive.
Well, I have to.
What do you mean by that?
I had a predisposition to use the title as unappealing as the name actually was to me.
A little clever, actually.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
3-2-1 has a dual role in sharing and communicating. The first of which I'm trying to illustrate with the title that you can't wait until something happens. It's too late in most cases. When you scrape your knee, you can't go to the store and get the Band-Aid done. You have to have these things in supply. So 3-2-1 is a countdown. It's during the good times that you acquire your resources. The average canned good can be used 6 years beyond their production, their canning date,
Sure.
even though they got a Best Buy on the bottom that says
Yeah, I know.
it gives you
Right.
18 months. So having a pantry well stocked, having a water supply independent of the municipal supply, these aren't the day-to-days really that we're talking about. These are a little more extreme preparedness measures, but they're a part of that large piece of pie that
So
we
you
call
must
survival.
recommend that a family, let's say, sit down and say, are we prepared?
Yes.
You know, what are the likely problems that could come to us and intrude upon our life? So are we prepared, you know, for
Yes,
those?
absolutely.
And, you know, you can get over-prepared. You can get, you know, really, as I say, paranoid about it all and be unreasonable. So what do you
Sure
recommend
can.
for a family to do and kind of be prepared but not over-prepared?
I would consider the rules of 3 or the urgency, the 3 minutes without oxygen, the 3. So water is probably one of the primary concerns that we would have. We become very used to turning on that tap. The good news is that you don't have to run out and buy gallons of water.
Sure.
Not that I wouldn't do that, but knowledge in this case. Most homes, apartments, have a hot water heater, if not all of them. So you have minimum of 30 gallons of drinkable water already in your house. If there were an earthquake today,
I thought about that. That's kind of a clever idea.
if there were an earthquake today, the first thing you should do is you should walk up to every faucet in your house and turn off the hot water. Turn it off. I mean below the sink, so that a child
At
or
the
other
main,
family
yeah.
member, right? Then you should go out the garage or the back patio or the room in your house or wherever your hot water tank is and turn off the gas or power generating that heat and turn off the inlet so that you're not
So the point being is that a
Contaminate.
family needs to have an education trip.
Yes, sir.
They need to know where the
Absolutely.
mains are. They need to
They
know where
do.
the gas main is. They need to know where the valves for hot water are, right?
Yes, sir.
Most people wouldn't know that. Most kids wouldn't know that.
Absolutely. And so I'm able to weigh between these types of skills and that wilderness that I talked about. The experiences that I had in the wilderness
Sure.
are great. They really are great, and I include some of those. But really, we don't have to go there, most of us. Knowing some of that stuff is great, but just knowing that if you don't import potentially contaminated water to your supply, you've got, if you were a single
yeah.
individual, you've got a month's supply of water right there, drinking water.
Yeah. And most people wouldn't think that way. I mean, you don't think about the water in your hot water heater. I think that's kind of gone. That's out of the way.
And
But
they
it's
don't-
actually a storage for you, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And they have an overflow valve on them that you could tap into at that point. And then once you get the all clear, you know your municipal supply is good, you, of course, can turn that back on. But you mentioned gas. So not only are you going to want to turn off whatever that is that's heating that water there, but you also want to go out and turn off your gas. Now, I believe I probably would get criticism by directing people to go do that themselves. So I'm going to say you should probably call your power and gas company to have that turned off. But we all have a valve on our meters that
That's
we can
right.
shut that gas off.
That's right.
So if there were an earthquake, again, back to that example, if there were an earthquake today, just like when we left the grocery department store and we became aware, we're going to be aware of what's going on in our house right now. If you had an earthquake in the middle of the night, you have children in an adjoining room in your house, you're going to ask them to stay. You're going to tell them to stay where they are. You don't want them walking around broken glass and debris. And you're going to go shut off all your hot water. If everybody's healthy, you know everybody's okay. You're going to turn off all the hot water, turn off the gas of the house. And then you're going to walk around and assess it, not in your bare feet.
Who's educating families? Who's educating people in survival techniques like this? I mean,
That's a
where
very
do you
good
get your
question.
education? If you don't read your book, where would you get an education like this? We lived in Texas for a while, and we were in the pathway of the tornadoes that came through. And we were educated as to what you do then. And we actually had to implement, what we were taught because we were in the path and we experienced that. It helped, but we were taught that. So who's teaching?
I'm not sure who's teaching it today, but I would hope many of the same formats are available that were when I was growing up. For example, we toured the local fire department and they talked to us about safety.
Sure.
But some companies that you work for, they have fire training to how to use a fire extinguisher, for example.
Yeah, very simple.
Very
basic,
simple.
right?
It is. Many of us remember our days in the Boy Scouts. I was a scout
Yes.
for a number of years,
So
a
was I.
Weevil and a Cub Scout. And so the preparedness,
Yeah.
right? and so there's in our schools we have fire drills. So we're really actually getting this information from a variety of sources a lot of the time, and we're just not assimilating it well. We're not sharing it and discussing it. We're kind of going through the motions. Okay, I'm supposed to get in line and go over here.
So how would a family buy your book, look through it, pick out some ideas that would be applicable to them? How can they get this book, and how can they use it?
That's a very good question. One I struggled with when writing it, trying to make something interesting that's also really almost a reference guide. It can be difficult and challenging. Yourself, you've experienced that as well, I believe.
Sure.
The way I would recommend, if you wanted this book, it's available on Amazon. I don't have it through your normal brick and mortar stores. I self-published.
But Amazon carries it.
Amazon, absolutely. Amazon
321 Survive.
321 Survive.
By Mark Scott.
Yes, sir.
It's all you need. You can buy
Absolutely.
it there.
And the first thing I would do is I would cheat a little bit and just make it fun. If you go through my book and you look for the big bold letters, interestingly, there may be history,
Yes.
how the canning process, preserving food, got started. A brief story of the Spanish flu, and
It's very educational when you think about.
So there's a
little
lot of
quips
little
of
things.
information and cute little stories.
And so
Yeah.
if I were reading it for the first time, which it was difficult to edit because my eyes glaze over, but I probably would look first at that. Maybe even look at the drawings. I did all the artwork myself in there.
Did you?
I did, sir. Yes. Made a bit of painstaking work between the literary and the artistic. So I would do that first. And the reason why is there's a lot of information in there, even for me to remember. That's why I wrote it. I wrote this not really to share initially. It was because I can't remember all that stuff.
Just for yourself.
Yes, sir.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
And you are a great storyteller.
Thank you, sir.
And you really include a lot of stuff in here, a lot of pictures, and it's an encyclopedia of survival.
I hope so.
I mean, that's what it is.
Yes, thank you.
It's a family book, but it's just good fun reading. That you can just pick up and just kind of flip through it and find something to read that might be attractive to you. Not a book you start from the beginning and go to the end.
Not a novel.
That's right. You just enjoy it as you go along. So I guess thanks for writing it. You can get the book, 321 Survive, Amazon.
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 Yes, sir.
And you can be approached. You have a website?
I do.
On the screen there in front of you?
Yes, sir. 321survive.com. It's really a placeholder right now. A few pages about us is really about me. What is my pursuit here? There is a communication tool. There's a form that you can fill out. Email me. I would like to, have not yet, but would like to work with student groups and churches. So your listeners are more than welcome to invite me to come out. We can demonstrate anything from long-term food storage, water purification, or just talk.
Beautiful. I'm glad you made yourself available to groups. And
I'd love to.
You're an educator.
Thank you, sir.
You've lived the streets. You've learned. Now you're sharing.
That's the hope.
Here's the final quote. The most important thing in life are not things. Very important.
Very important.
They're family.
Yes, sir.
They're friends. They're lessons we learn. They're people we meet. They're people we meet on the street. It's coming to the table. The most important thing in life is that kind of an experience. It's not the things you buy and play with. It's the people in your life.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week. Dr. Teach Me to Parent. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Pompe disease is a progressive, multisystemic, debilitation, and often fatal muscular disease. The United Pompe Foundation was formed to assist those affected by Pompe with the medical costs and other expenses that they may not be able to fully cover through their insurance. Visit UnitedPompe.com to learn more and to make a tax-deductible contribution to the United Pompe Foundation.
When I set foot on the campus to come visit it, I was struck by how open and how welcoming the students and the professors were. Coming to Gordon was like coming home.
I think intentional community is what Jesus modeled with his disciples, and Gordon has really fostered a good place for intentional community to happen.
Gordon is a place where you can meet people from all over the world and hear their stories. I meet a lot of different people who are shaping who I am today.
Gordon seeks to graduate men and women of character and of leadership, and the world is the place where Gordon students belong.
Choosing to go to Gordon was, I think, one of the best decisions I've made in my life. Expect to be changed.